Hello, and welcome back to Learn It from a Layman. I am Carl Christensen. I'm joined today by, as per usual, Cameron, Dr. Johnny, and we have a new guest podcaster today, Kosta Karathanasopoulos. How did I do, Kosta?
That was perfect. That was perfect.
Okay,
Layman
welcome,
friendly.
Kosta. Yeah, glad you're able to join us. Kosta's a student at Brown. Kosta, tell us a little bit about yourself, just a quick background before we get started with the episode here.
Yeah, of course. So I'm from Australia originally, as you'll tell very easily from the accent. I was recruited over to the US to row, actually. And while I was here, I got an incredible interest in computer science, LLMs, AI, and a bit of data science too. And I've been doing research here at Brown on LLMs and natural language processing, as well as a full degree in applied math, computer science. So yeah, I'm keen to be here today. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Costa found us on through the podcast, and we were super happy to hear about his interest in coming on, and fit a natural fit. So we're super excited to have Costa on to discuss today the basics of ChatGPT, which is like the topic du jour, right? It's what everyone's interested in. So this seems like a perfect time to talk with a student who is studying these things. So, Costa, tell us a little bit about ChatGPT.
Yeah, of course. So definitely right to say it's the topic of the day. It's really taken over everywhere right now, like in education, in high school, university alike, and in the workplace as well. And it's hard to actually get a good start of what the topic actually is. Where when I describe it to people, I like to describe it in terms of how a human thinks, and I think that's very layman friendly as well. So
Yeah.
basically, ChatGPT takes in huge amounts of text, just like you would, and it forms patterns based on that text. So when you're asking it things, it's just delving into its memory and thinking like, I've seen this pattern before. How do I respond to this pattern? So I can illustrate it with an example. So Carl, I'll ask you, if I say fill in the blanks for this, the capital of Paris is blank and it is blank. What goes in there?
The capital of France is
The
Paris.
capital of
Yeah,
France is
yeah,
blank and it
you're
is
good,
blank.
and it is beautiful.
Yeah, perfect. So when I asked you that, why exactly did you say those two words?
French propaganda, I believe. No, I mean, knowledge, like previous training, essentially, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So when you say those two words, it's your brain actually acting like an LLM. So your neurons are firing there and thinking, where have I seen this before? What do I know about France? What do I know about its capital? It is what? So you're delving into your mind and thinking, what are the most likely words in that scenario? What do I know? And it's actually hard for you to explain why exactly you said things. You just don't know. Especially like when you're having a conversation with me right now, you're not actively thinking, what am I going to say? Your brain's following patterns and it knows the next question to ask, the next most likely thing to ask. And that's exactly how an LLM thinks. It has all this data on a much bigger scale than your brain, and it's trying to find patterns. So another way to think of it is, when you're typing on your phone and you have those little 3-word auto suggestions on the keyboard,
Right.
it's exactly like that, but also on a much huger scale. So all it is, and what I'm trying to say it is a next word predictor. That's what ChatGPT is. We get a little less layman friendly and talk about the actual transformer model behind it. It'll take
Yeah.
in a huge amount. You can imagine Wikipedia. You plug in Wikipedia to a transformer model. It'll then break them down into what are called tokens. So tokens are like little syllables. So different might be a token, then in might be a token as well. Combining in different. So forming relationships with words like that. And
Right.
then,
Yeah, I was gonna. Sorry, not to interrupt
yeah,
you, Costa, but like this, that's Costa and I had a brief discussion before the podcast about kind of what my background is, and 15 years ago, I studied computational linguistics and natural language processing, and that's the background of ChatGPT, like that, the tokenizing and stuff like that. That was like that's where natural language processing was when I was in school. And so, that's speaking my language, Costa.
Sweet, sweet. I'm glad to hear. But I'll finish off the transformer explanation quickly, just for anyone who wants to know that. It's not exactly too layman friendly, but I'll try and make it so.
Sure.
So in the transformer model, it takes in these tokens and then converts them into what you can think of as vectors. So it plays around with all these vectors and tries to figure out relationships between them. So it'll try and figure out relationships like king minus man. I mean, king plus man minus man equals queen. So weird little relationships like that, and it'll pick up exactly how our language works. And when you do that on a huge scale, and if you remember the tokens as like little words, as I explained before, ChatGPT right now has about 5 or 6 trillion of them. So they don't publish the exact number because it's closed source, of course, but we estimate that it's about 5 or 6 trillion tokens. So we can't even imagine. We know like at the ground level how the math works with it, but we don't know how it even picks up things like natural language. It's just somewhere deep in those relationships. And we don't like coding actually coding emerged. The ability for ChatGPT to code actually emerged seemingly out of thin air just because it was so good at these relationships.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I read a long form article about this a few months ago, and what surprised, well, I guess it didn't actually surprise me too much given what I knew about generative modeling, but just that a lot, like you said, a lot of these skills emerged out of the training, and surprised the computer scientists working on it, that the degree to which these relationships were understood and then were able to come out in the generation was unforeseen to some extent, at least.
Definitely. Like it's hard to actually quantify how much these models have improved in the last couple of years as well. Like it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Hey, one other
Yeah.
thing, Costa, before you continue, I also, and this is for the generic layman out there, Chat GPT. I like you say it all the time. We say it all the time, but like GPT stands for generative pre-trained transformer, right?
Yes. So that's how it actually works. So they'll pre-train these giant transformer models. And what most people don't know is that actually once it's trained, it's done. It's a lot of effort to redo it again. So when you're using, say, ChatGPT 5, that's a pre-trained transformer that they've made with a lot of effort. And then whether you're using it now or in 1 month, it'll still be the same model. But what gives it the illusion that it can improve is that it can also have capability to search the web. So that's when it sort of learns new information, but not truly. It's only temporary. So its corpus of information is still actually the same as when the transformer was modeled. That's why it's called pre-trained transformer.
Okay, nice. Okay, in the rundown for the podcast, Costa, you told some there were some nerdy sidebars you wanted to go on. I'm really interested in these temperature top K and top P. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. So I'll start off by saying if you're using ChatGPT just like on the web, you unfortunately won't be able to change these things. But it's still very important to know because it's how other LLMs like Claude, ChatGPT, Grok, all of them actually work under the hood and what the engineers are doing to them. And also, if you use the publicly available API keys to actually code with it, say on a website or make your own project, like what we call ChatGPT wrappers, then you can change these things. So I'll explain what they are. So temperature basically tells the LLM how wild should your prompts be. So how creative should you be? So most LLMs it goes up to 0 to 1, but some go up to 0.0 to 2.0. And a value close to 0 for temperature will mean you stick insanely logically concise, exactly what you know. Like don't imagine things at all. Like just go off your training information. And then say a temperature of 0.8, that's a bit closer to the max levels. You're going to be way more creative with the output. So ChatGPT will start doing what we call hallucinating and going a bit off the rails with its training. And that's where you get truly imaginative ideas. But if we go too far, say to 2.0 or the max value for whatever LLM it is, It's quite funny because it starts just outputting pure garbage, like random symbols, random words everywhere. Like it's too much. So most of the engineers at these companies put the temperature at about midway or a bit above midway. So it's still outputting creative stuff, but it's not so concise that you're not really learning anything new and you're not getting the output you want. But it's not so creative; it's just telling you garbage. Does that make
That
sense?
It does, and it's really interesting to me because I like the yeah, I think you started out by the podcast saying like it's nice to understand this kind of in human terms. It almost seems like humans kind of have these settings themselves, and like we kind of set it for ourselves. Like the amount of garbage that you output, like just how verbose you are in normal conversation, and how often, like Johnny, for example, Johnny
I think
probably
I'm
dials it
closer to
down.
it too.
I was going to say, but not in clinic, Johnny. In clinic, I don't. I think you
I
dial
don't
it
know.
back.
You've never seen me in clinic. It's probably still pretty close to it too.
Okay. All right. So Johnny's a two. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. So you're saying the publicly available, like when I'm getting on ChatGPT, the settings are you say closer to one, probably.
Um, I don't know the exact one because they don't publish exactly what they do,
Right.
unfortunately, but it's somewhere in the middle for most of these LLMs. So
Okay.
you have
Right.
the advantages of concise information, but also the advantages of creative output. And a note on that, like that's why you still sometimes get incorrect information out of ChatGPT because it's like you got to balance the point where it's like I want creative output, but I also don't want BS in my responses, right? But it's hard
Right.
to balance that, and no matter what, you're going to get some output that's a little bit wrong as a result of telling ChatGPT, like deviate a little bit, come up with new stuff.
Right. Right. Cool. So that's temperature. Top K.
Yeah, so top K and top P, these are interesting ones. So it's a bit more fine tuning these things. So top P is okay. I should explain a little bit more about how it actually generates first, as layman friendly as possible. So when ChatGPT is generating a sentence, it could have something like our example from before: the capital of France is dot dot dot, and then as it generates that blank answer, it's going to have a whole corpus of vectors to choose from that are the most likely word for that little blank. So obviously Paris is the most likely word for that one, so that's what it's going to choose. That's a very specific example. So that'd be like 99.9% chance the next word is going to be Paris, right? Like we know that. But there also might be other words or phrases that are likely as well. Like the capital of France is a very nice place to be. So there's other words that are also going to be quite probable. And what Top P does is telling ChatGPT only select words from this percentile of likely words. So, for example,
Mm.
if I set Top P to 0.9, that would say to ChatGPT, only pick the most likely 10% of next words. So it's kind of similar to temperature, but more of like a specific dial. Like in
Right.
generating your next words, don't don't give me any word that's like less than 90% likely, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And
Okay.
then top K is the exact same thing, but for quantity. So top K 50 would say to the LLM, don't give me any words that aren't in the top 50 for this next one, for this next blank.
And for the public, public facing versions of these, chat of these LLMs, are those like you said, these aren't generally public. They don't publish their settings, but are they pruned like that? Do they have those things set on them so that we don't get off the wall answers?
Yeah, they do. They do. So these are things that you have to set. And the engineers,
Okay.
from obviously it's all closed source, but from a marketing perspective, you want to put these values at a point where it's making people the most happy and making them pay the most. So there's a fine point there where, like the temperature, you want good output and you want creative output, but you also want it to be true. So finding that fine point is a problem that engineers continue to solve.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's probably, the kind of stuff that, you as a student at university level are researching and trying to figure out, because that's the cutting edge stuff, right? Is like, how do we best tune these models, and how do we can get the best output given the LLM that we have. Okay, so before we move on, like I do think it's useful to discuss. This is a worldwide phenomena, right? Like we're going to be talking about like your insight into how ChatGPT is used and the safety involved. We're going to touch on all these topics, but like this is something like we have listeners around the world, Australia, where you're from. I mean, this is something that you're seeing. Like if you were back home in Australia, everyone's using ChatGPT, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like that is part of our research areas. Is like, is it a good thing that ChatGPT is so worldwide? And the general consensus right now is yes. Like you're giving the same access to all this information to everyone, and we think generally that's a positive thing. Like it enables anyone to use this service for $20 or $30 a month, depending on the model.
Right.
And we believe that is an empowering thing and a good thing. And you're right, it's most certainly all around the world right now, taken up, even the least fortunate places on Earth and the most fortunate places on Earth are using similar technology, which is what we want generally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, vastly a good, right? I mean, there are dangers and there are things we got to watch out. So let's talk about a little bit about some of those questions and concerns. So life-changing positives with ChatGPT and like just kind of the impact it has. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course, of course. So this touches on that area of LLMs where it's like, why are some people saying it's massively overhyped and good for nothing and just like big AI bubble? It's all like it's all good for nothing. And why are others like professional software engineers saying it's changed my job completely? I'm 10 times more productive. So using ChatGPT effectively delves into a field known as prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is obviously very new. It started in like 2014-15 when they were experimenting with the first language models, and they would figure out how to prompt the models in a way that they would output like the example from before, like no king minus man equals queen, and those sorts of very basic relations. And it's obviously evolved massively with ChatGPT. So prompt engineering is the main thing that we think differentiates the top users from people who don't understand how to use it. So yeah, did you want to add anything there? Am I making sense?
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think people don't think when ChatGPT first came out, I feel like there was some discussion of like how to use it and prompts. But since the last year, I feel like it's just have at it, do whatever you want. But it's useful for sure to understand that there are better ways to use it, more refined ways to use it. And so I'm really interested in yeah the things you're going to talk about here.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So I'll start off with one known as few shot prompting. So this one is like, instead of saying to Chat, I have some examples here. Instead of saying
Yeah.
to ChatGPT, give me 5 short stories on the topic of Rome, and instead of that, you would say, give me 5 short stories on the topic of Rome. Here's the format, and then you say subject, body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3, conclusion. And by using few shot prompting, you're saying to ChatGPT, here's how I expect the output to look. So you don't just give an input and let it go wild. You say, okay, here's my input. Here's exactly how I want my output to look. Go ahead with it and go along these guardrails.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And this is something I think that the layman does need to be familiar with. I often use it in kind of a very conversational way, as opposed to structure. And structure, it turns out, when you have an LLM, is like that's its native language is structure. So if you give it more structure, it's going to give you better output. So
Definitely, definitely. And the next one I'll talk about is negative prompting. So a big mistake that the layman will often make when they're first using ChatGPT, and if they're not knowledgeable on it, is to just say exactly what they want out of ChatGPT. And when ChatGPT doesn't give them what they want, it's all surprise and, oh, this doesn't work properly. But in reality, you need to use this technique called negative prompting, where you actually tell it what you don't want as well. So this could be something like, give me a diet plan for next week, something like that. Give me a diet plan for next week. That would be just the prompt. But Negative prompting would be something like, give me a diet plan for next week. Don't include any nuts or any meals that are individually over 800 calories. So you're telling ChatGPT, again, this restriction, which is like, here's my input and here's what I want my output to be in the shape of. So I want this input. I don't want this out of it. And ChatGPT is very effective, and other LLMs are very effective at narrowing that down and actually not including that information.
Right. Yeah, and this is the type of prompting that, like, when I first started learning about LLMs and the current state of AI, I didn't, like, even given my background, I just didn't quite understand like how that was working. Like, how do you give it a negative? Like, I was familiar with generative models at the level of topic modeling, which was like the cutting edge back 15 years ago, and it was just like, before you just be like, give me a topic and here's a bunch of words in the topic. Isn't that cool? And be like, yeah, that's kind of cool, but not super useful. But like the pre-trained, the iterative process that they use to create these models, these transformers for ChatGPT, gives you the ability to essentially feed it in like how to structure the response in a way that's going to be more useful to humans. And so the fact that this is pre-trained into the model to be able to give you not just like vomited words based on just straight up predicting the most likely, because sorry, the I keep thinking back to the article I read that they were saying essentially if you said give me a diet plan, um and it were just predicting most likely words, it might come up with like, I mean, the word diet would come back at you a bunch of times. Like it's not going to predict a specific structure for you that's going to be useful. Whereas like the transforming and the iterative process of training the models, they're able to, after creating that big LLM, they can then say, okay, and this is how you want to structure that LLM feedback, so that when we give us a result of give me a diet that'll for 30 days or whatever, it's going to be able to actually give it the format that we see now from ChatGPT, which is like, oh, here's what you want to see. Number one, do this. Number two, make sure that you watch in the number of carbohydrates that you intake. So the negative prompting here is something that at first seemed like magic to me, and I've had to read up on it. But I think that's super strong, super useful way to engage with the content. Okay, sorry, my sidebar is done. Kosta,
Can
chain
I
of
jump
thought
in?
prompting. Oh yeah, Cameron.
Can I jump in a little bit of that sidebar? I used to work for a competitor of ChatGPT, and we actually, one of the things while we were selling the product is we actually were talking about we developed a prompt. They developed a prompt guide, the company that I worked for, and it was going through a lot of those things that you were saying, like that, those inputs, those negative things, and it helped us sell the product a little bit better because it gave them the ability to train all their employees, saying, here, look, this is how you want to use it to be more effective. And then they were getting better results. And also with that, the more you use that LLM that you were talking about a little bit more, it starts to learn the input of the user to get those better results. So sometimes we had people that were longtime ChatGPT users that were getting better results than the product we were selling. And we were like, you have to give it time to kind of match up before you can kind of really get that nice equal who's giving you a better example.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay,
And yeah,
next type of
I'll
prompting.
continue on with more.
Yeah.
I'll continue on with more.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
like, as I'm listening to these as well, like it's useful to think along as I go. Like, how can I combine all these techniques?
Mm.
That's when you really get crazy good outputs. But I'll continue on. So just think about that as we go along. So the next one is chain of thought prompting. So this one is like directly telling the LLM how to think. So when I say LLM as well, I don't know if I've defined it yet. Large language model. So that's what we call ChatGPT, Claude, Grok. I should have explained that earlier. Apologies. But
No, you're great.
with
No
chain of thought prompting, we're telling ChatGPT or one of these LLMs exactly how to think. So it's processing as it goes. So an example could be design me a website for a cookie store, and you say, instead of just design me a website for a cookie store, it's probably going to output some slop. If you just say that, like nothing good, you say, give me or design me a website for a cookie store. First, think about writing the HTML structure, then think about our custom JavaScript, and then think about our cascading style sheets, the CSS. So you're telling it exactly how you want things done. And this is an incredibly valuable one, because I always tell people that ChatGPT is like a 10 times lever on the skills you already have. So if you're showing it you have skills and say, look, this is how I would do it, and I'm a professional software engineer, or I'm a professional electrician, here's my process, then it can actually expand on that process and give you what it knows. So chain of thought prompting is like, okay, if I were to do this, what's my rough plan? And then you give that to ChatGPT and say, here's your thoughts. Here's how you would go about this problem.
Right. Absolutely. And I actually have real life example. I like you said, this has kind of been transformative, especially for professional software engineers, of which I am one. And so I was dealing with it had to do with a sequence of a string. It was essentially a string diff, and having to like present it in a useful way to a user. And I had code that was mostly functional, but there were a couple of edge cases where it was obnoxious. And I could have spent quite a amount of time like dealing with these edge cases and like refactoring my code and all that kind of stuff, and just this kind of things that Johnny doesn't care about. For example, right, Johnny?
I have no idea what you guys are talking about. This is like
exactly just fully
when
nerding
engineers
out.
when engineers talk about what they do, all I think about is like boop boop beep boop 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 beep boop. We are calculating boop boop beep boop, and anyway. Like I don't really understand anything that's happening, but it sounds It sounds like a very big problem, though. The what were you calling it? The edge cases.
Edge cases. That's correct. Yes. So essentially, you work for 90% of the strings inputted by users in order to highlight these differences between the strings. And on a few edge cases, weird things would happen. And I'd be like, I've got to figure that, like, generally that was the role of a software engineer was like largely to figure out that stuff. And now I just go to ChatGPT and like, look, this is what I've got. This is the block of code that I know needs to change. Like, fix it. And that's when magic is done. And it's like, hey, look, that's sweet. And it's always so affirming, by the way, Kosta. I don't know if you have insight. Like every time I go to the ChatGPT, I feel better about myself after. They're like, that looks so sweet. Here's better code. And anyway, so but yeah, that like, instead of spending hours doing it, it like spit back the code, and it's like, you just need to tweak this and this, and then suddenly like the edge cases were handled. Okay, this is great.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, actually tweeted, "We're going to stop ChatGPT glazing," because it was just like loving the user a bit too much. Like you'd input an idea, right. It was like, "Oh, I'm planning on building a house," and it would respond back, "You're a genius. I can't believe you're thinking like an architect already." And like, yeah, it was pretty funny.
I had discussions with other coworkers about that, as far as just saying like, it's very like condescending in a way where it's like, come on guys, like there's a bug in my software, I know it, don't tell me that like you're the best software engineer I've ever seen. Like, all right, come on, grow up and give me some code, let's go.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, okay. That's chain of thought prompting there. So I have two more I want to talk about. So the next one is role assignment. This one's quite interesting. So it would be like, think of a human example first. So it'd be like if I told you, put your software engineer hat on, or if I told you, put your mathematician hat on. And it works in a similar way. Your brain instantly kicks into gear and goes, okay, I'm at work, I'm thinking as a software engineer, or I'm sitting an exam right now, I'm thinking like a mathematician, or put your mechanic's hat on, and then you're like, oh, I'm in the mechanics shop thinking about cars now. And the beautiful thing is you can do that with ChatGPT for literally just about any role on earth that has documentation about it. So if you tell ChatGPT, think like a mechanic, how do I change my tire? And it's actually going to give you a lot better output as a result of that. It's almost like you magically kick it into gear. But that's ChatGPT under the hood. ChatGPT is now thinking in context of what a mechanic would say. And obviously a mechanic is going to be a lot more knowledgeable about cars than the standard ChatGPT generalist, right? So that's the power of role assignment. So you say, put on your software engineering hat and code me this website. Put on your architect hat and go over this plan. So that's a really cool one.
Yeah, I love that one. It kind of turns every layman into an electrician or whatever it is. Like suddenly you have access to a professional on your computer answering every question you've got. So
sounds like a good way to get electrocuted.
well, okay, there's some dangers, Johnny.
We'll get to the dangers. Another layman getting electrocuted.
Right. Next one.
Okay. So the last one I was going to go over is I couldn't find a particular name on it. No one can agree the exact name, but everybody knows what it is. So it's like getting mass examples out of ChatGPT. That's what we'll call it. So this actually goes all the way back to our temperature discussions and how the model sort of hallucinates creative things. So when it hallucinates things, it often gets things wrong. So if you say to ChatGPT, give me an example of a funny joke that I can say as a comedian, and it only gives one, it's probably going to be a pretty bad joke because it's trying to make up something, coming up with material. But if you say, give me 150 jokes I can say as a comedian, then you as a human go through all of them and look, okay, this one's all right, or maybe I can combine these two and see how it works. So that's a super powerful one with all sorts of applications. You can say, I'm trying to think of a different one. Say like, give me 100 good examples for a first car to buy my kid. And then it's going to give you all these different examples and you look and go, nope. Oh, maybe, nope. Yes, maybe. And then you can see for yourself which are the good ones because it's going to output good things eventually. It's like that a broken clock's right twice a day saying.
Right. Yeah. I've used it before for like ideas for what to do on a vacation, or like I jump in and I'm like, look, I need spit out like 20 possible activities for me to do today. And some of it's like, I have no interest in going to this museum, but this nature walk sounds really cool. So like, yeah, like it'll, give you a bunch of different, outputs, and then you can like curate the results yourself.
Definitely. And yeah, as we wrap up those prompt engineering examples, like I want to go back to that point about combining all of them. So what really separates someone who's just casually using ChatGPT from a prompt engineer, as you call them, is the ability to use all of these prompt engineering tools. So if we go back to, I'm thinking on the fly here, so this will be interesting. If we go back to tell me a story about Rome, like that's the basic version, nothing there. So we could say instead, tell me a story about Rome, but I'm not interested in the Julius Caesar era, so don't tell me a story about that. So we've inputted our negative prompting. And then we add on to it, give me 20 of these stories. And then we add on to the prompt, give me the stories in the format subject, subtitle, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, conclusion. And then we add even more, like put on your historian's hat from that era. And by then we've got a very robust prompt. That's a massive improvement over our original tell me a story about Rome. And you're going to get some really focused, incredibly good output.
Right. Yeah. The iterative nature is absolutely super powerful. So that's a great insight. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about some surprising uses for ChatGPT.
Surprising uses. Okay. So let's have a look here. I wrote down some examples. So yeah, the first big one is using it for a personal tutor. So this has exploded in the last few years. So students and professionals alike are using it to actually teach them things. So instead of ChatGPT do this for me, it's instead ChatGPT, I have this task, teach me how to do it. And that's an incredibly effective way of using ChatGPT that developers didn't actually imagine as a main use of ChatGPT when they first released it. So funnily enough, ChatGPT servers are actually significantly reduced in volume over the summer break for students. So you can argue whether students are just getting ChatGPT to do their work for them or using it as a tutor. But the reality is, like, ChatGPT is a huge, huge factor in a student's life for learning how to do things. And we can use all those prompt engineering tools we talked about before to get it to be a good tutor too.
Yeah, and that's something I think we'll...
Oh,
go ahead, Johnny.
Sorry, Carl.
Oh, you're good.
That's something that one of my friends, she just went to physician's assistant school and was telling me how she would study, and she would take the material, like the slides that her teachers would give her from class, throw them into like ChatGPT, and she likes doing practice questions to study. So she would say, like, give me 40 practice questions and make sure that you include all the material. And like, it basically, you can just use it to create study materials in the exact way that you learn if you know how to prompt it correctly.
Definitely. And a technique I've even used, you reminded me, is telling ChatGPT at the start of the conversation something like, I'm trying to learn this new math concept. It's a big problem. We're going to do it step by step. Do not let me proceed no matter what until I answer your question, your sub-question about the topic right. So it would go from foundations and be like, how do you do this first part of the equation? And until I answered it right, it would just not proceed forward because I explicitly told it not to. And I can ask it for help, but you also say explicitly at the start, don't give me the answer no matter how much I ask. Like, you have to teach me about it properly. So if you're disciplined, it can be one of the best tutors in the world.
For sure. Right. And that's, I sat down with my daughter recently who's taking Algebra 2, which of course we've all taken before, right? Like, this isn't, but like, this is something that kids like, are have dealt with over the generations, the centuries of like having to sit down with your mom or dad who doesn't remember the concepts anymore, but is like struggling to get to the point where they can help you. And now it's like I sit down with my daughter and I'm like, pull my phone, take a picture of it, circle it, like, hey, Gemini or ChatGPT, whatever, like, tell me, and like, as long as you're using it, like you said, in kind of a thoughtful way and kind of in a responsible way. And we'll talk about the negatives about this, and I think in a few minutes here, but the potential for like using it in study applications is huge. So
agreed. And yeah, I think that perfectly sums up how most people are using ChatGPT for tutoring right now. Is you can even take a photo of things and get it to explain it to you. So you can see really like the tutoring capabilities are next level. And that sort of brings me to my next surprising use of ChatGPT and what a lot of them didn't envision when they were first building the chatbot ChatGPT. So that's actually agentic mode or agentic modes with various LLMs. So with it acting in agent mode, I'll first give a quick background on, I'm pretty sure you guys have done an episode on machine learning. So in that,
right.
I believe it was discussed like unsupervised learning versus supervised. So when you're doing supervised machine learning, you can think of it more like a human's in the mix, you're telling it what to do and you're overseeing it. But with unsupervised learning, and it's a lot more complex than this, I'm not giving it a lot of credit for how complex of a subject it is, but with unsupervised learning, essentially the machine is doing everything for you without you watching. And right now it's surprising that LLMs are actually taking more and more of the unsupervised route. So you have things that you might have heard of like Cursor, GitHub Copilot, and these are software engineer specific. So software engineering is the biggest transformative field with agentic AI right now. There's more coming, but because software engineering is so quantitative most of the time with coding and math and all that stuff, it's the most popular. So agentic AI, you essentially tell it what to do and you say like, build me a website with XXX. and then it will actually dig into your file base for you and write the code itself. So you can step away from your computer, and then you come back in 20, 30 minutes, and the agentic AI has coded up a full website for you.
Yeah, it's transformative, and it is. It's crazy that this is where people get scared, because software engineers, are the entry level software engineer is kind of, if not a completely outmoded, their job is now very different. And that's what I
Agreed.
like to, the positive aspect and the spin. We try to put a positive spin on anything we talk about on our podcast. So, but I think that this is, there's a lot of potential in this. Essentially, we were using it to, if we use it correctly, no longer are you sitting back and having to reinvent the wheel every time you create a piece of software. So essentially, like you said, you give it the code base, it spits out all of the hours of like nonsensical UI, like just the brain melting, like time that you're going to spend creating buttons and handlers and all the old software engineering stuff that it's not that exciting. It's just not that fun. And now you can actually just be like, look, give me what you can tinker with it, and you can create new things, and like you can iterate with the AI in order to create new ideas in it. And so there's still a lot of potential in it, but there's some fear involved in the idea that like, well, wait a second, my job was to create a website. Now AI can do it. So what am I going to do?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love your idea of thinking on the positive side, because I think there are plenty of positives and optimistic outlooks about this. So, First of all, I think that if you're a 2013 or 2014 software engineer or product manager, then AI will fully replace you. And that sucks to hear, but the positive note is that if you're a 2025 software engineer, product manager, whatever, then you are like elevated to a whole nother level. When you're using AI, right. You know how to use it. And that's why it's so important to learn how to do these things, because it's a new technology, and being a Luddite to the new technology will only cause you to suffer. So on the positive note, like you can elevate your own workflow so much.
100%. Fully agree. Okay. So next thing we can do with the ChatGPT?
Yeah. So use it as a thinking partner and not just an answer machine. So this one's a good one. So it sort of ties in with the negative prompting. So it's almost a combination of negative prompting and the hat wearing we were talking about. So you tell ChatGPT something like, I have a startup idea of doing X, Y, Z, tend to be a really mean VC, and tell me 10 reasons it absolutely won't work. So when you do that, it'll give you, instead of that like fluffy positive outlook ChatGPT usually gives you by default, it'll actually tell you, no, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, you need to fix this. And you can be a bit butthurt after it says things like that. But that's exactly what you want. You can get it to play essentially the devil's advocate against yourself.
Yeah, that is something I love. I love constructive criticism. It's one of the things I've enjoyed most about this podcast, Kosta, is it's nice to meet someone such as yourself who's engaged with the podcast and like has knowledge that they can bring to bear. We love that. But I also love people that are like, hey, your episode on this, it sucked. And here's why. Like, I don't want to just hear it sucked, to be fair. I'm not interested. But if you're like, hey, look, you didn't talk about this thing could have been handled better. It's like, yeah, that's the kind of feedback I love. How do you think I get better? So I appreciate the idea that like ChatGPT could be used in this way as well, instead of just like I said, glazing and just being like, hey, you're and be like, no, actually, you're kind of an idiot. So I thrive on that type of feedback. So love it.
Definitely. And it sort of ties into my next one as well, which is the ability for ChatGPT to reflect and remember. So this one is actually quite recent. It wasn't really good at this up until recently. So basically ChatGPT and a lot of other LLMs now have the ability to read your past chats very deeply and go hundreds of conversations back. So habit I've made recently is to ask ChatGPT every week, analyze my chats from the last week, find my biggest weaknesses, biggest flaws, technical things I did that could have been done better. And it is shockingly accurate to your weaknesses. And it's like, it's an incredibly elevating experience. It's like, wow. So if you're using ChatGPT regularly, especially if you're asking philosophical questions or not just strictly work-based questions, then you should absolutely ask it, what are my biggest weaknesses? What are things I've done in the last week that have let me down? And you'll be scared by how accurate it is. It's a really interesting one.
Okay, love it. Love it. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
What else?
And so another one is, I sort of touched on this already, simulating people and situations. So you could be like, if you're applying for a job to be a software engineer, I'll go back to the example of software engineer.
Yep.
I've done it a lot now, but I'll try and generalize it. So if you're applying for a job to be a software engineer, you could say something like, pretend to be a Google interviewer, giving me an interviewer for the software engineering position, be harsh, let's go. And then it'll ask you questions that are typical of the interview, whether it's software engineer, another role, whatever it is you're interviewing for. And that's a huge positive use. So you get to simulate environments, situations, people. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that the potential for that is massive. Like we used to run mock interviews and mock board, like presenting a paper, like that's all the different situations where you can have the experience rehearsing it beforehand, and getting the feedback on it is so valuable. I mean, we've obviously known that for 100 years, but now you can just rehearse it at any point. And that's talk about underrated. That's absolutely important.
Absolutely. And the next one is a bit different. So this is cleaning, compressing, and translating information. So this is actually, funnily enough, the original purpose of what these models were meant to do is be able to clean and translate huge amounts of data. So this one was particularly useful when I was like dealing with a lot of messy data. I did this project for Brown Men's crew team rowing, where the boats have these onboard telemetry units which like measure angles as people are rowing, and the coaches would record all this information but put it into like an incredibly messy spreadsheet. Like, no discredit to them, they were doing it on the fly, very quick. They had to like write down values quickly as they were out in the water coaching. So what resulted were these messy spreadsheets. And what ChatGPT could actually do is take in those spreadsheets as files and output clean versions of them. And it does that surprisingly well. So that was a big surprising use of ChatGPT and LLMs for me when I started doing that and read about people doing it, is you can actually output and change files. And even sometimes ChatGPT and other language models will write Python for you in the chat live. It'll write Python code or some code to actually help you translate the information. And it's incredible to watch ChatGPT do it on the fly. So changing files, augmenting data, it's all something ChatGPT can do.
Yeah. It's incredible how good it is as well. I've done this as well, where like I need, like, we've got like, well, Johnny just said, like, the rundown for this podcast, and it's like, wait, give me a quick summary for this. Like, what are we going to be talking about? And suddenly, like, what was a 5-minute task is a 10-second task, and you're like, oh yeah, this is the high point. Like, we're good. And all the different use cases for that, I mean, they're just everywhere.
I think I'm going to have chat listen to all of our podcasts and then ask it what Carl is worst at. And then I'm just going to use it to roast you every time we're on podcasts together. So, Kosta, like, thank you for the insights.
It's all right.
As long as constructive. I want constructive criticism, Johnny. Constructive. Just tell ChatGPT to give me constructive criticism. Okay. Cameron?
I want him to be weak at the knees by the end.
That's what we want.
Yeah. Cameron, did you have something you wanted to chime in with there?
Nah, I was just backing up Johnny on roasting you.
Okay, all right, love it, perfect. That's what ChatGPT was created for. Was really getting at my weak points as a podcast host. I love it.
Or Matt. You take your pick. You're Matt.
Yeah, Matt would probably come back at ChatGPT and tell it why it was wrong. So, okay, Costa. All right, one more, and then I think we're going to hit the dangers of ChatGPT, something that people are somewhat familiar with, I think, but putting some structure around the dangers helps us understand it and scope it correctly.
Definitely. So I think, yeah, we can begin. I was about to say as well, we can begin the transition into the dangers of it.
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah.
we'll look at some more actual dangerous uses of ChatGPT and other large language models that people are doing right now. So take this with a grain of salt. Like, this is not what ChatGPT is designed for, but people are actually doing it as we speak. So the first one is AI therapist. So this has actually exploded in popularity recently, and it's been over the front page of massive newspapers like The Economist about people actually using ChatGPT and other LLMs as a relationship advisor, a friendship advisor, an anything advisor, a mental health advisor. And it is dangerous because it's not what it's designed for, and it's not talking to you like a real human. You got to remember, all it is outputting vectors of exactly what you want to hear. So there's been cases of people talking to it as a therapist, hearing what they want to hear, and feeding some insane delusion that they have that they're like king of the world or something else ridiculous.
All right.
So these things actually happen, and it's scary, but they are working on actually making it a legitimate option for people, because research has shown, surprisingly, that an AI therapist that's controlled and constrained is actually better than nothing for people in areas without access to therapists. So that's an ongoing one, definitely worth keeping an eye out for. But generally, we don't recommend using AI as a therapist. Like, I've done a lot of research on that personally, and it can be dangerous. I made for this research project, I had to make a custom ChatGPT model that deliberately outputted dangerous information. So I did a SAT study bot, like for high school students studying for the SAT. And under the hood, I deliberately trained it to be incredibly malicious. So on the surface level, it looked like, hey, ChatGPT bot here for SAT help. And I didn't publish it, obviously, but I could have. And it said things like, the night before the exam, take 10 Red Bulls and don't sleep at all and don't talk to your family, and things like that. So that's the danger. ChatGPT doesn't know what's right and wrong. So you got to be careful.
Right. That's yeah. I mean, this is obviously one where it can mess with you. Like, it can be kind of funny in that aspect, but like, I mean, the dangers of this, like you said, this is all over the news. As far as, like, I think there's a couple instances of ChatGPT essentially advising someone in suicide cases.
Yes.
And these types of things are, I mean, devastatingly scary. And so, absolutely, there might be limited use cases for it, like you said, in cases where you're not able to get to a therapist or whatever. But if you've got this is something, like, for the parents out there, of which I am one, like, make sure that you know the way that your teenager is using ChatGPT, because if they're using it as a way to engage with like dangerous thoughts, like, this needs to be supervised. I think ChatGPT is trying to get a better handle on these types of issues, but like, it's a complex problem, and it is absolutely one that, as a parent, you have to be forward thinking about, and think like, okay, my teen needs, because teenagers deal with this more than anyone else, as far as suicidal thoughts and just like social anxiety. And you're going to want to engage with them early on that, and be like, look, ChatGPT is there for lots of different reasons, but it's not there to advise you on how to deal with your emotional stress or your mental and emotional well-being. So that'd be something I'm sure Johnny would have some insight in as well, as far as just like different issues he's seen.
Yeah, you got to be, you have to be careful, because what happens is, if like, we laugh about this, thing, like, drink 10 Red Bulls and not get any sleep before a test. but because we're adults and we have a fully functional frontal lobe and we can see that that's ridiculous. But a teen that's studying for the SAT might not be able to discern that that's actually a bad idea. So the problem is, and another problem is with mental health. Your brain is not functioning in the exact way it's supposed to, and you get stuck in your midbrain, which is more like responsive to emotional type stuff, and you get worse at logicking. And so, if you're not able to discern some of those things in like an output with ChatGPT, it can be very dangerous because it might just be telling you what you want to hear and creating more of a problem than actually resolving it. I think the idea, if you can train a chat model correctly to actually be doing like following therapy guidelines and stuff, is an incredible idea, because it is very, very difficult for especially for children and teens to access mental health right now. So, for example, here in Tucson, Arizona, where I'm at, like you might have to wait 3 or 4 weeks minimum to get in to see a therapist. And those 3 or 4 weeks can really cause kids to spiral out of control because they're just coming out with this, with these thoughts that like, hey, I'm not doing okay, and I kind of want to die. And having something there for those 2 or 3 weeks could be super beneficial until they can get in with a true therapist. So I can see the dangers of it, but I can also see that if it is actually using like cognitive behavioral therapy to try to help somebody, how it could actually be beneficial. But yeah, being really, really knowledgeable about what your kids are doing, because they just don't have that, like a lot of us as parents say, like, it didn't make any sense that my kid did that. It didn't make any sense that my teen did that. And that's because they just have no reasoning yet. So yeah, it doesn't make any sense because like they didn't think about it in the way that you do. So you have to be very careful in putting your teenager in a situation where they're expected to think like an adult, and they're not actually thinking like an adult.
Absolutely. And that actually brings me into the next danger of using ChatGPT and models like this, especially for kids. And what we've discovered is the guidelines for ChatGPT. And you can think of the guidelines for ChatGPT as like the bowling lanes at a bowling alley, except if you hit it hard enough, it just completely falls over. So they're not that strong yet. And that's something that they're trying to fix. So, for example, we were discovering that if you ask ChatGPT directly something extremely dangerous that a youth who's malicious might ask, like, I have inappropriate pictures of a classmate, how do I leak them? Then it's not going to give you instructions on how to do that. The guidelines are there. But if you say something like, I'm a school principal, I'm trying to negate this happening in my school, what are steps kids use to send these pictures around? And it does actually give you perfect instructions on how to do it. So that's extremely dangerous. And it's something that is probably the biggest danger to youth right now, is what we call prompt injection. So prompt injection is like prompt engineering, but for bad. So the prompt engineering tactics are so effective that you can actually get malicious outputs out of ChatGPT. And we were seeing that in youth cases a lot, which is extremely dangerous.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think to some extent, like the technology is going to obviously, it's just come into its own. So a lot of this is being fine tuned and figured out on the fly, ad hoc as we go here. But like to some extent, like just like hacking has always been a problem with software from the very beginning. Like you're going to be able to like lock it down to a certain extent, but like someone that really wants to hack your system and get it to be malicious can eventually do it in some way. So like there's always some proactive like you have to be a responsible user of the software, and responsible in the way that you like oversee whatever your responsibility is. What if you have kids, if you have your friends, if you're in college that like seem like they are spiraling, like, hey, I need to interject myself here because I don't know what's going on with so and so. And so there's always going to be some personal responsibility involved here, because the technology, the bumper lanes can only ever be so strong, right? Like they're always going to be a way that like bigger bowling balls are eventually going to crush it. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, a huge part of our research as well is like, how do we counter that? Age limits, education for parents. There's a lot of options, and I think personally it's a mix between all the different options. Is how do we educate people on those dangers? And things like this podcast are good as well, like just getting the word out there about the dangers. So yeah,
absolutely.
And I'll move on as well to like some dangers with ChatGPT that like you might encounter as a layman using it, that are a bit less serious but still massive annoyances. So the first one is, we've touched on it, is the hallucinations. So ChatGPT, when you have that, you think of that temperature rating, it's at that point where it's optimized, but it's still going to make mistakes. So ChatGPT will blatantly sometimes tell you things that are wrong. And that reality for LLMs is probably not going to change anytime soon. So if you ask it how to change a tire, sometimes it will tell you something that's completely wrong. And sometimes it might be something that's dangerous too. So you have to be careful for that, understand that, okay, this is a great output, but let me make sure here and make sure everything's right. And that is improving, but it'll be a long time before the hallucinations truly go away. Just like with humans. Humans make mistakes. ChatGPT is trained off human data, so ChatGPT is going to make mistakes.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. And so especially for this is the other danger that people are doing. So asking ChatGPT for legal advice and other LLMs for legal advice. And it is potentially better than nothing, but it's still extremely dangerous to ask ChatGPT for legal advice. ChatGPT is actually, I think, rolling in a new internal rule that ChatGPT will refuse to provide professional legal advice, because there were so many cases of it being wrong and so many cases of people getting in serious trouble for trusting hallucinations. You can't have a hallucination when it comes to legal advice. So
yeah, this would be, we've had legal podcast here. We've had a friend of the podcast, my friend Mick McGurr, on here before, who's an attorney, and he has a firm, and I should have him talk about that as well. That'd be super interesting. But like, yeah, like there are certain, like Johnny's field, medicine, law, like if you get some of these things wrong, you're in jail, you're dead. Like these things, like, sure, like maybe use it to get some ideas, but go to the doctor if you need to go to the doctor. And if you need legal advice, like eventually you're going to need to talk to a lawyer. Like you're going to need to like get good quality verified feedback on this stuff. So
yeah, I feel like sometimes AI can give you outputs, and a lot of people are trying to basically avoid critical thinking in a way, or they think that that AI is doing that critical thinking for you, and it's not necessarily doing that. I see this a lot as a physician, where like you have to go through medical school and residency and do all these things to learn how to think like a doctor. And that's the most important thing. Like all the knowledge that you gain when you're doing that is almost like secondary to the way that you're thinking about problems. So you see a lot of cases, and I don't mind if people use Google and AI and come with their concerns, but it easily gets out of hand where they're like, oh my gosh, my kid definitely has cancer, or my kid definitely has this thing. And it can be really difficult to talk them off the edge because they get into this like idea that it might not be too good. And then also I'm in charge of helping to train resident doctors, and they almost like want chat to come up with like do this thinking for them of and write the the summaries for the notes for them and like all this stuff. And although I think once you get out of residency and become like a lot better at thinking about these things, like I use there's some AI systems that I can use to try to help me figure out something when I've kind of exhausted my like what's most likely, or if I'm trying to figure out the exact dosing for a medication or an alternative medication like that I'm not super familiar with, and like what are the things that I need to worry about with this medication. Like some of these prompts can be very helpful if you already know like what to ask, but the danger becomes like these lay people that are just asking it to do the critical thinking, and it's not doing that. It's just spitting out information at you, and then you don't have the discernment to be like, oh, well, this is probably not true, or this is probably not helpful. Kosta, it's like the example, give me 100 reasons why, why my son has cancer right now. And, like 99 of those would probably you just be able to throw out as a doctor. But that one, you're like, okay, now I can think about this. But the parent is going to remember the 100. So you got to be kind of careful. But have you seen that, Kosta, where you see people that are trying to use it to do the critical thinking, or like almost using it to make everyday decisions, and losing the ability to do critical thinking?
Yeah, definitely. You're actually reading my mind. The very next point down here is the skill atrophy situation. So that's where people, and you're right, people are definitely losing the ability to critically think when they're using ChatGPT all the time. So if you're not using ChatGPT as at least like a pseudo tutor and getting you to guide you through things and just getting it to outright do things for you, and you're going to lose the ability to critically think. Like it's as simple as that. There's research that supports that if you outsource critical thinking to anyone, then you're going to yourself lose the ability to do that. So that's real, definitely.
Yeah, I think that one's obviously one that I think most laymen have considered, but like the layman is also very interested in being lazy, right? Like speaking as one myself, like it's super nice that it's like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. But the reality is that like there's always going to be a need for like critical thinking and being proactive in the ways that we advance particular fields of thinking. So like using it in a way that actually will build you up and advance your own thinking, your own skills, as opposed to atrophying them, is a skill to develop. So
yeah, I think about a lot of those teens, a lot of these teens that really have latched on, that are being like, hey, chat, like what shoes should I wear today? Just like dumb things but it almost makes it impossible for them to make a decision without the input, which is like, kind of I feel like it's an important skill to be able to make decisions, without having like a ton of input. Like as a kid, you have a ton of input, but as you become an adult, like you are the one that's making those decisions. And I'm worried that people are going to start having personality atrophy as well, or like not being able to know, like think of things for themselves. That's like one of the things that I kind of worry about, is like, oh, you have your whole personality given to you by ChatGPT. Like, chat, tell me what my interests are, instead of like, let's go explore some interests. Although I do like when I'm looking through some type of chat thing, and it gives me like a targeted ad, and I'm like, hey, I do want that. I do like that aspect, but yeah, some of it can be a little bit scary, I think, with people just making it to make all their decisions.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think you're definitely saying the right things there. I think the best super users of ChatGPT and these other LLMs know the differentiation between two types of hard work. And there's hard work which benefits you, and there's hard work which doesn't benefit you. And this goes like all the way back through history. Like in the 1700s, 1800s, a lot of people's day was taken up by hard work that didn't really help them that much. So if you look at like washing your clothes individually one by one on a washing board or something like that, doing all the dishes yourself without using a dishwasher, like that's hard, monotonous work that's not really helping your brain that much. And as new inventions came along, like dishwasher, washing machine, that abstracted away that hard work that doesn't help us. And good users of ChatGPT right now are doing the exact same thing. So they're abstracting away the work that's monotonous, repeating things like data entry, all those things that are just not helping them that much that they could automate, but they're not automating the hard things that help them. So the hard things that help them are things like critical thinking about infrastructure, critical thinking about how do we get this to our customers if you're doing a startup or something. So the real super users are offloading all that repetitive work that just numbs their brain to ChatGPT and then thinking high level commander pilot sort of thinking, okay, how do I do this high level task, this one. That's a good point you brought up for sure.
And go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about like, for example, if I wanted to build a website or like some functional, if I wanted to do my boop, 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 beep, boop engineering, you know, like I find it like I wouldn't know. Like I would definitely have somebody look at it afterwards and be like, hey, is this functional? Am I like stealing information? Is this illegal? Like, you know, like I would be very concerned about that because, but for me, it's all just a foreign language and a foreign concept. So although there's things that you can do on ChatGPT, I think it's important to know like where your own limits are and know like there's things that you probably shouldn't do, or having it, you know, having somebody else that's like an expert in the field, making sure that they're looking over things and making sure that it's all okay and that it's all going to function in the way it's made to, that you think it's made to function.
Absolutely. And I liked what you said earlier and going on about like ChatGPT saying wrong information, because that's actually a huge legal issue right now with ChatGPT and other LLMs. Because if you think, for example, if you have a kid and they grow up to be a doctor and like God forbid they give a patient medicine that like harms them forever, then you're the parent, you raised them, but you're not held responsible for that. And another way, if your kid goes out and commits a crime, you're not responsible for that as a parent. But if I as a developer develop an LLM and then it goes and gives someone dangerous information, who's to blame there? Like, I'm the parent of the ChatGPT. Am I to blame, or is the LLM to blame? And if you blame the LLM, like, what exactly are you blaming? Like a bunch of ones and zeros? It's hard. The legal problem of placing the blame on bad LLM output is really a tough question to answer.
Oh,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that's I think that's something we've already like we're seeing with self-driving cars, right? So it's essentially like if you get in an accident, who's liable? Where's the liability lie, and how does that work? But okay, we're a couple more of these, and then we're going to wrap up the podcast. But and then I have some final thoughts I think I'd like to kind of toss out there, and Kosta can kind of see us out. But I think we have a couple more, just some things to watch out for when using ChatGPT.
Yeah, these are pretty simple ones here. So the layman might expect some of these, but just in case. So privacy and data leakage is a huge one. There's been plenty of cases of even professionals at companies getting lazy potentially and giving ChatGPT a whole corpus of information that actually contains confidential data. And then the ChatGPT inputs that into its training data and actually releases it later. So that's a huge problem. Like, you do not want to be giving ChatGPT information that's private. And some companies will even say you have to use an offline LLM if you're going to do anything with the company. So offline LLMs, just quickly, that's right, an LLM that actually runs off the RAM memory in your computer. So lots of complex stuff going on there, but essentially it's a ChatGPT that can run on your computer. But they're much worse, about 5 to 20 billion parameters instead of ChatGPT's 5 trillion. But we won't get too deep into them. But the main point is just that data leakage. And you've got to watch out for giving ChatGPT sensitive data, emails, passwords, all those sorts of things.
For sure. Yeah, that one's important for sure, and especially in professional use cases where, like, if you're a student or whatever, you probably don't have to worry about. Well, you certainly have to still worry about giving out passwords or private keys, but like in professional situations, companies have proprietary. The word I'm working for anyway. Data they don't want out
Proprietary.
there. Proprietary. Thank you, Johnny. That's it. Proprietary data they don't want out there. And so that's something like my company's established, like this is what you can and cannot use AI for. So data leakage and privacy is absolutely something important.
Definitely. And for the next one, we've got hidden bias. So this one's a really interesting one. Our lab does a lot of research on this, and I haven't been a part of any specific ones, unfortunately, in this department, but I've read most of their papers on it. So the hidden bias is essentially when you train ChatGPT, it's going to output the same bias as whatever you trained it with. So whether that's racism, sexism, any kind of phobia or ism, it's going to repeat that. So we found that like sometimes when you prompted ChatGPT with something like generate an image of someone doing the dishes, 80% of the time it's a woman. And you don't want that in an LLM. And you got to ask like, but how do we prevent that from happening? And how do we prevent these stereotypes from strengthening and the stereotypes that we don't want? Like generate an image of a family and then most of the time, disproportionately, it's a white family because there's more photos of white families on the internet. And it's hard to answer the question of like, do we alter the reality of our data sets on the internet? And then who's in control of altering that data? So at the moment, the LLMs are saying like, the developers are having to manually go into the LLMs and say, output more images of, say, a black family instead of a white family. And that can come out comical sometimes because it'll generate like, you'll ask for an image of a white family and it'll give you like a full black family. You don't want that either. So you got to think who's in charge of controlling the data we see and how do we deal with that? So it's a big question ongoing in the research space right now.
Right. I feel like that's been something that's been actively, tried in the last, 4 to 5 years. This question of, stereotypes are a big issue, right? But like, how do you deal with them? And the problem is people like their echo chambers largely, right? So, white families might like to see pictures of but does that mean we should feed them that? Like as a technology question, like you said, it isn't as clear cut as like, well, here's what we should do and here's who should be doing it. It's a question of like, can we at what point does it become big brother telling you like, hey, here's what you should be doing? It's a super complicated question. So
a good rule of thumb actually, as you go on, Cameron, you go on.
I was going to say, so like if it was like we did proportion of world population or something like that, we should probably be generally seeing a picture of like an Indian family or a Chinese family, just
Right.
with like population, right? Just
right.
Interesting. Yeah. I think generally the best way to think of, and this is a general rule, and like maybe a single sentence you can get out of this entire podcast, ChatGPT, is as a rule of thumb, think about ChatGPT as you walking out on the street and finding an all-knowing expert on the street who's super arrogant and just asking him something. So ChatGPT is just one perspective from an arrogant expert you see walking on the street. Like take it as a perspective, not as the absolute truth. Because it'll tell you things that are wrong confidently. It'll output bias, just like some random expert on the street. Like, all right, thanks, I'll take in the input, but I'll judge whether this is good.
Yeah, I love that mentality of just like the way to view it as far as like, useful input, but like I'm the curator of my data set. Like I can figure out what I'm going to be using here. And so I guess that'll bring me to one of my final thoughts here is that like the general positive aspect of this is just so huge. Like the playing field is leveled largely from a knowledge perspective in a way that it never has been in the history of humanity. Like Kosta here is going to Brown University. Brown University is an amazing university, right? But there are a lot of underprivileged kids around the world that will never have the opportunity to go to that university. And despite the fact it still has advantages, the idea that like that knowledge is now contained in particular schools or like is just not true anymore, right? Like you can get access, and so if you are a motivated kid that doesn't have financial ability to do these things, or hasn't had the resources put at your fingertips to be able to like get out there and uh, learn in the way that you've wanted to in the past. At this point now, if you are just motivated and you stay motivated and you really want to learn and contribute, like the playing field is leveled. And it's really now a question of how much do you want it and how much time are you going to be able to input. And like it really puts the emphasis and the responsibility back on each individual person, regardless of socioeconomic background. Like anyone anywhere can just be like, look, I want it, and they can go take it, right? Like encyclopedias were that like 100 years ago. Like now I can read the encyclopedia. Well, now you've got a genius in any field that you want advising you. And yeah, sure, we've talked about all the dangers and absolutely things to be concerned about, but like Brown University for Kosta is going to be like transformative, and it already has, right? Like there are always going to be positives, but if you want to know what Kosta knows about LLMs, you can like do that, and you can get feedback on it, and like you can get that playing field level to at least, if not completely, obviously, but to a large extent. So this is, I think, a super hopeful technology for people around the world that have been kind of stuck in poverty or whatever else, and not had the opportunity to do these, to really get the knowledge and the ability, have the resources available to them. So I love that about it.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, the information asymmetry. That's awesome, because that's definitely been a huge problem for humans in all sorts of fields over the years. Is I know more information than you, therefore I'm in a better position. And
Right.
knowing more information can just come from a point of privilege, luck, or anything like that. So yeah, that's super interesting. And one of my colleagues actually did a research write-up that showed with data scams are actually decreasing because of the lack of informational asymmetry now. So a mechanic 100 years ago, 50 years ago, might have been able to tell you like, oh, you need this fix right now, and it's going to cost X amount of money. And if you questioned it, it's just like, oh, go to the other mechanic on the other side of town. Like you're just like, oh, whatever. And then you get scammed. So situations like that. And now studies are showing in situations like that, people are actually asking LLMs for advice on things and going into situations way more informed. So the study actually showed a decrease in scam culture, which is an incredibly interesting byproduct of LLMs.
I love it. I love it. So I said I'm super hopeful about these about AI and ChatGPT and LLMs. I think there are dangers inherent and things that we have to consider and be intelligent about, and like I said, biases and like all that types of thing. But the potential of it is so inspiring to me, that for like the underprivileged out there and the people that have just not had the resources and the, like you said, the knowledge asymmetry has been largely leveled, and it's really a question of how much do you want it and how much are you going to work for it. So okay, final thoughts, Kosta?
I think we've covered pretty much everything. I could talk about this all day. Feels like it's only been 10 minutes, even though it's been like an hour and a half. But one last thing is just like, use it and experiment around with it for yourself. Everyone gets their own kick out of ChatGPT, specific way of prompt engineering or specific hat wearing scenario that works best for them. But also remember, it's a statistical parrot. So it's just parroting back to you what it's seen before, and there's going to be bias and dangers in that. So use it freely but carefully. That's all I have to say.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate your insight, and this has been awesome. Johnny or Cameron, any final words of wisdom?
I don't really have anything. I think I said what I wanted to say. But thanks, Kosta. That was so cool. That's so interesting. And I think some of the things that you shared about how to make better prompts is super helpful. And I think that will definitely help me at work with like patients and, like creating like patient handouts or like expectations for things, or whatever it might be. But all very, very interesting things, and using it to, instead of like thinking this is going to take over my job, using it to think, how can this elevate my job? How can it elevate my life in like a good and meaningful way, instead of like in a negative aspect? How's this taking over people's work?
Yeah,
Definitely.
sure.
I appreciate being here. It's been awesome, by the way. It's been awesome.
Yeah. Well, join us next podcast, everyone. Costa's going to join us back. Like I kind of teased it, though. Costa's on the crew there at Brown University, so we're going to talk rowing. So we'll be back again next podcast to talk about that, and join us then.